Okay, so we just have the animation and stuff in Marmoset, and Marmoset a lot of times will throw like a random sky at you. This one was a good example because this one's just awful for what we're trying to do here. It's super dramatic and not that great. But we also don't have any of our textures applied or anything, and it looks a lot more like nightmare fuel than what was intended. Yep. So I'm going to change the preset real quick and just get something to where I can see a little bit better. Something like, I don't know, this museum one's kind of good. And Annie's is a good example because we have multiple meshes, so you'll have to apply the material multiple times. But it comes in and it's usually applied with the material that has the name of your file on it. So that's the one, and you can check this by going in and dragging. I think I actually took it off for a second, but make sure you know what material you're on. I like to just throw on default just so everything's got a base. We're going to have to put the weapons on as well. So those maps that we baked out, the main ones are going to be your normal map, your AO, and your cavity map or curvature. So normal map's easy. We just go down to the side under surface, click the big empty square, and bring up your normal map. And as soon as that's done, you get a lot more detail. Things in your life are a lot better. This thing just keeps hitting the thing and clicking, and it's bugging me. So for your AO, we're going to use albedo and add that in there too, so that we just get a base sort of gradient from our where everything's occluded. And then we also want to add in the occlusion in the occlusion part. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the shader, there's a little occlusion section. You click on that, and it's currently set to none. You can change that over to occlusion, and it gives you two spots. Oh wow, would you imagine that? Occlusion and cavity. Wonder why we had you bake those out. So you can apply the occlusion map again, and it's just going to get a little bit darker so you can get some more contrast. And then you can add in the curvature map, and you can play around with it. It's a little funky. It's going to be a little dark. I'll show you a trick to what we're going to do with the cavity map later, but you can play around with that, and maybe you want to mess around with the diffuse cavity and bring that down, and just let it be specular, or you can just turn it off. It's up to you. But that's where you could throw it. If your character is a little bit too shiny, your main controls for that, since we're not adding any sort of gloss map or specularity map, is just these sliders. We can play around with our glossiness and basically our specularity. What was the dumb thing I said yesterday to somebody? They're like, what's the difference? And I went, this one right here, gloss map, is how shiny, and this one down here is where shiny. So, I mean, it works. Right now I'm just going to throw these down because we're working with a mostly fuzzy creature. And who's committing suicide, Annie?
I fixed it.
Yeah. A little too late, he's already dead. My favorite has been playing around with this. And you start here, and you do that. So, for what Frank wants, we currently have this this blurred gradient background. And that's not what he's going to want from you guys. He wants a lot of uniformity, so your guys' stuff works well together as a group. So you're going to click on the sky. And it doesn't really matter what skylight you have as long as the lights aren't super dramatic. Before Frank left, he was talking about like making sure you don't have any intense reds or anything like that. But we're just going to change the mode to color. And then he wants something along the grayscale from what he was showing me. And pretty much anything around middle gray to, probably about like 75% is good. Do not use black or, yeah.
Excuse me,
Do not go full black or Frank will yell at you really hard. Fun fact, when I first started at Chico, I had already been like a 3D artist for a long time, and we submitted our first student awards show stuff, and I won with a black background, and Frank hated me for it. Because he told everybody, don't ever use black backgrounds, and then I come in, not even taking his classes, and won first place with a black background. He's like, this is just a bad example.
But you won.
Yeah, it was because the model carried it. So yeah, play around with that. We're not going to do any blurred backgrounds or anything like that, just because if you could imagine something like this shifting every single character, it's going to look a little odd, and sometimes your characters even get lost in the background. So just change that mode to color. And then for a little bit of extra effect, we're not really grounded in the world because we have nothing to catch our shadows. And luckily Marmoset has a good solution for that. You go to Scene, Add Object, and there's a lot of objects you can add into here. And one of them is a backdrop, or one of them is a shadow catcher. I stopped short there. Shadow catcher, and it usually comes in really small, especially for people that have a lot of movement. Like if we take this one for example, yeah, pretty much that's where I'm setting everybody's when I'm going around. Is you just change this to 1,000 by 1,000. But most of your characters, if you have any movement, is going to just walk off. And you're not going to get much. You're not seeing the effect of it right now because I haven't gone through and added the lights. But let's just set this to 1,000. It starts out pretty high number-wise, but not size-wise. So if we set it to 1,000, it's still not that big. But it's big enough for most of your guys' animations, unless you ran through super far. Then to actually get an effect from this, your skybox is not going to cast any shadows at all. You're going to need some lights in here. And to add lights using the skybox, this is one of the greatest features of Marmoset. You just click right down here on your skybox, and you get a light, and it picks the color of the HDRI. So that your lighting actually fits in with what we've got here. So we can go in from this window and we can capture some of the blue of that sky. Now, what you are going to end up doing is probably adding a couple lights, and then you run into a problem. So let's say we pick one of these lights over here. There we go. Close enough. Just trying to get one of the lights on the wall. Yeah. So, we currently have 2 shadows. They're also very, very sharp. You do not want to have multiple shadows. We're just going to focus on having one because it's not going to be some weird, intense lighting on your character. So to fix that, we go into whatever we don't want as our main light, click on it, and turn off cast shadows. That part's solved. Second part, go into your shadow, or go into your other light, the one that is casting a shadow, and change the width down here in the shape. Let me move around so you can see it a little bit better, but we currently have very, very sharp shadows, which is not very realistic. If we just up the width there, it'll blur it and be a little bit better. Also, as Annie was pointing out for her animation, it floats. And you can fix that by just grabbing your main group and bringing it down. And then her toes go through the ground, but that's another problem. So now you can run this through, see how it works, but you're going to want to frame your character with some movement so that we don't have the picture in the side of the video and then your character's even smaller there and nobody can make it out. So one of the main tricks for that is to actually use a focus target. And we'll come over here, and this is really cool. A lot of camera tricks have been added to a lot of 3D programs lately that makes camera movement a lot easier on you. Is we will grab our character. This right here is the group of our character, but if we watch the animation, notice how that pivot never changes. We want to follow the actual character, not the group. So we're going to take the shading group here that is the actual character because it's the mesh. And we're going to click this checkbox that says camera target. There can only ever be one camera target at a time. Then all we need to do is set up our camera in a good starting position and click our main camera, and down here under control hit follow target. Now our camera stays in that position, and as we play through it, it will actually move your camera for you. And it's a lot better way of keeping your character in focus. And this is currently not going through all the animation. I think it was like 550 frames or something.
Yep.
What? Oh, because our max frames down here. Where are we going? So now when we play through, we can check the whole thing. And the camera follows. This also presents another problem that all the camera follow does is just sort of pan with it. It doesn't move. So if you wanted something to move in a really drastic way, you might have to keyframe some of the camera movement. We're just going to do like one axis and keep you guys very simple.
Or none.
Or none, yeah.
You know, I don't trust you guys that much.
Your goal is to basically get the character to be in a lot of the render. So if it starts out small and then gets bigger, that's also good too with the camera follow, and we just keep it on there. But you're going to have to play around with it. Also, it's going to do that every time it loops. It's going to jump the camera. It's not really going to affect your renders, because when it goes to render, it's going to start from the first frame where you have your camera set and go over. So if you want to preview how it's actually going to look, you have to pause it, let it find where it is, and then go from there. You also want to do this last once you're done setting up the scene, because now when I try and do things, it's pretty much always going to face that character. So now, once I've gotten rid of it, I can go and move around. But yeah, go ahead and play around with your stuff in Marmoset. Have fun.